All right. Could someone who is on Zoom just confirm for me that you see a PowerPoint presentation right now?
Yes.
We can see it, yes.
Okay, great. With me in the room are some very special guests, but the one I'm going to introduce first is David Liebensberger, who is one of my predecessors. He used to be the president of Patterson Park Neighborhood Association, and he will be doing the introductions for our guests.
So thanks everybody. I'll just be real quick. I'm David Liebensberger. I'm former president of the Patterson Park Neighborhood Association. And I'm happy to introduce my friend and former colleague, Andrew O'Connell from Murphy Falcon and Murphy, and his associate, Paris Holmes, that will give their presentation today about your rights with ICE. And so without further ado, I'll let Andrew begin his talk.
Thanks, David. It says, yes, we go way back. Colleagues, we work together, and I was heartened a couple of months ago, maybe 6 weeks ago, when David asked if our firm, Murphy Falcon Murphy, would come and make a presentation to the Patterson Park Neighborhood Association about your ICE rights, because we have this new, well, not a new law enforcement force, but a new the manner in which they are exercising their powers. We need to talk about that, because there's individuals in this community that are vulnerable and could find themselves subject to being on the wrong end of an ICE encounter. We want to talk a little bit about that. I also want to just take a moment, and this is heartening for me because I go way back. I've been to these meetings back in the day when they were run by a man named Ed Rutkowski, long time ago. And there was a lawyer, his name was Andre Weitzman, and they were battling something called predatory lending back in the day, back in the 90s. I see one head nodding. Back in the day when the community was challenged by all of that, and it survived and thrived. And I'm thrilled to see what it became, and that people are still coming to these meetings. So I'm from Murphy Falcon and Murphy. Paris Holmes here is my associate. I'm going to go through some of the basic interactions that you could expect with ICE, what to do. And then Paris is going to get into a little bit more specifics of the law to help round out this presentation. So first and foremost, with regard to ICE, look, everybody has rights when it comes to your interaction with ICE. They're protected by the United States Constitution. Basic things, your right to due process, which all that means is you get a right to be seen by a judge in the event you're taken into custody. You have a right to have legal representation. Okay, doesn't mean that the federal government is going to provide you with a lawyer, like you see on television, right to remain silent, you have a right to a lawyer, but you have a right to consult an attorney. So if you are taken into custody or you are questioned, you have a right to consult a lawyer. And you also have a right to be free of unreasonable searches and seizures. All of those protections that we are familiar with, we all watch enough police television shows, apply to whether you are, whatever your immigration status is, whether you're born in the United States or whether you are visiting here. So we talk about those basic rights. We're going to break them down into two groups: your home and on the street. If you're in your home and an ICE agent comes to the door and knocks, you do not have to answer the door. ICE agents can only forcibly enter your house unless they have what? A warrant. That's right, exactly. And if you are presented with a warrant by an ICE agent, this is important. Look at the document. Don't just allow them to walk in, because you don't know what they have in their hand. Check the warrant to check to see if it has your name on it, to check to see if it has your address on Because if it doesn't have the correct information on it, it's an invalid warrant, and they shouldn't be in your house with it. If an ICE agent, you're presented with an ICE agent on the other side of your door, you don't have to open that door, but you can communicate with that individual through the door or through the glass. Again, you do not have to let them in. You have a right to remain silent. You do not have to show them any documents. Do not show them any false documents, and don't lie. You also have a right, and this is also important. ICE agents have been, I'm going to use the word bullying, individuals to sign documents when they're taken into custody. And what those documents end up turning to be are documents that surrender whatever legal status you might have in the United States, such as permanent residence, permanent legal residence, or a green card. Now, in the street, if you are stopped by an ICE agent, there is no searching your pockets or searching through your car without a warrant. You have a right to take photos and take video of an ICE interaction, so long as you remain at a safe distance when you're doing so. If you are stopped, though, when you are in your car, it's a little bit different than when you are on the streets. You have less rights when you are in your car, certainly with regard to the presentation of your driver's license and proof of insurance. If you are stopped by the police or something like that, you're obligated to provide those documents. You do not have to answer, this is important, you do not have to answer your status, your immigration status to an ICE agent or to anybody else. You remain silent on those issues. If you are arrested by the, let's say, Baltimore City Police or the county police, you, like all other rights, you have to remain silent. You would have a right to an attorney. However, if you are stopped and taken into custody by ICE, it is a little bit different. You do not have a right to a government-appointed attorney. Those are just some of the very, very basic things, which is basically, don't talk to ICE. You don't owe them anything with regard to immigration status, what you have in your pocket, or anything else. If they have a valid warrant with your name on it and with the correct address on it, certainly that's a different situation when they have the right to enter into your home. But they cannot just snatch you off the street. They have to have an arrest warrant for you, again, with your correct name. With that, I'm going to turn this over to Paris. He's going to get into a little bit more specific about what your rights are in your interactions with ICE. This is Paris Holmes.
Chuck and Andrew and David also. Just start with the background, I'm gonna also share that David prepared some of these questions. David prepared some of these questions in preparation for this presentation. So without further ado, I'm gonna just jump into those questions and have a slideshow basis as I go along. All right, so question number one. What are Kavanaugh stops and how do they impact people of color? Spell it, sorry. All right. Technicality, figure it out. So yes, what are Kavanaugh stops and how do they impact people of color? The Kavanaugh stop is a term that started floating around just a few months ago after what's called the Noam v. Vasquez-Perdomo decision that the Supreme Court issued. And it's called a Kavanaugh stop because it's issued by Justice Brett Kavanaugh. The more important and salient question I think that follows it is how are people of color impacted by this decision? per question. So following the decision, ICE officers will be permitted to do, they'll be permitted to consider her apparent ethnicity when they do these ICE enforcement activity that they're involved in. So when they're conducting immigration enforcement, such as stopping a person to ask them questions about their immigration status, they have to have what's called reasonable suspicion, which the law calls, which what the law requires them to do. Notably, apparent ethnicity alone is not enough. That's not the only thing that they're allowed to consider. There are other factors they have to take into account. And this is just your apparent ethnicity. The other factors include whether there's a high number or percentage of illegal immigrants that are in that particular local area, based on data that's available, whether the persons that are in this area are tending to gather in certain locations to find labor. Generally, it's labor that doesn't require paperwork for you to get that job. Day laboring, landscaping, agriculture, construction, jobs like that are essentially suspected to be appealing to people who are undocumented persons, and so they are a frequent target in that ICE officers will go after, essentially when they're considering and doing immigration enforcement. The third and final consideration that they also take into account is whether the person speaks fluent English or not. So in addition to this person's apparent ethnicity, all the other things that they consider when they're doing immigration enforcement, just based on this recent Supreme Court decision that came out, according to Justice Kavanaugh. What's the decision about? Really briefly, essentially, in LA, ICE was doing these large immigration raids. Local folks challenged it in court. A U.S. District Court granted an injunction, federal government appealed, and that's how we get to this decision in Justice Kavanaugh's pronounced. It's just basic background on how we got there. Number three, what rights does a person have in encounter with police as opposed to ICE? And that was some of the things that Andrew already said earlier, and supplements to some of that as well. So police encounters are generally governed by four sort of really important amendments. The Fourth Amendment, which grants the right to a person to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures by the government. The Fifth Amendment, which gives us, of course, our due process rights, which Andrew alluded to earlier. It also is where we get the Miranda doctrine from which everyone's heard of, the right to remain silent, et cetera. All of those come directly from the Fifth Amendment. And the right to a fair and speedy trial with the assistance of counsel or lawyer. That comes from the Sixth Amendment. So all those respective constitutional rights are still in place even when you encounter ICE. There's just a difference in how you assert them with ICE as opposed to with police. ICE encounters specifically, these Kavanaughs that we talked about, where there's not a felony crime being committed, being observed by the officer, the ICE officers specifically, they're designed really just to figure out one thing, whether that person is lawfully in the United States or not. It's supposed to, in theory, in there. In practice, sometimes it looks different. We'll get into that later. And I should also note that again, these Fourth Amendment protections apply to non-citizens also. So even if you are not a citizen of the United States, you still get protected by the Fourth Amendment. And that's really important. So how do these rights differ in different settings? When you're in your home, as Andrew talked about earlier, that is where you have the absolute utmost right to what's the law called a reasonable expectation of privacy. It's your home, it's your king, it's your castle, it is your residence. So you have the utmost absolute protection when you're inside your home. And generally, of course, as you said earlier, police cannot come into your house without a valid warrant at that. There are generally like one of the real exceptions to that, of course, if you let them in, but you do not have to do that. Let's talk also about certain administrative warrants. So there's a difference between judicial warrants that Andrew talked about, that judges sign and issue to police generally, and there's also administrative warrants, basically executive warrants from the federal government or from the executive branch of the government. Those do allow ICE officers to detain people. They allow them to do their basic authority of immigration enforcement, but they're distinct from judicial warrants. In other words, they don't authorize ICE to do searches of private homes as judicial warrants might allow them to do so. Importantly, immigration enforcement in general is civil, different from when police are trying to act on criminal activity and essentially put someone potentially in jail for whatever crime they've allegedly committed or suspected to have committed. ICE detention is all about trying to figure out is this person a lawful citizen or not, and give them and essentially initiate the process for them to challenge deportation if it gets that far. On the street. So seizures and police government stops are another facet to where this where the Fourth Amendment comes into play. I think it's important to note that when you are seized, the Fourth Amendment governs searches and seizures are essentially when you are stopped by police. And essentially the key to figure that out is, are you free to leave? You're always welcome to ask police, am I free to leave? And the answer to that will pretty much determine whether or not you are in fact being detained by police. So it's always important to ask that question. This is different from, of course, also in your car as well. As I alluded to, if you're being pulled over by police, you have to provide a license, things like that. So you do have less protection afforded to you with your home, where usually protection is pretty much absolute. Here's what's also unique and special about police encounters on the street in your car. Like we talked about earlier with the Kavanaugh stops, police only need what's called reasonable suspicion, not probable cause for those particular stops. So they reasonably suspect that crime is afoot or something like that. They can stop you. Likewise, Kavanaugh stops with respect and similar to these police stops also have to be supported by reasonable suspicion. Workplace is the final place that I'm going to add just briefly as well. Is workplace protection depends entirely on where you work. If you work in a public setting, ICE officers could potentially get access to public health. If you work in a real private will have more protection. And of course, the big thing is, do they have it on? Number 5, is there a difference between the rights of citizens, green card holders, visa holders, and other immigrants in these encounters? The short answer really to that is no. And this is coming directly from Justice Kavanaugh's concurrence that he wrote in this Supreme Court decision. And the bottom line is that reasonable suspicion, when officers are making these stops, ICE officers making these stops, it means that they may briefly stop the person and ask about immigration status. If the answer to that is yes, you are a lawful person, regardless of what that status is, by way of visa, by way of green card, whatever that status is, as long as it's lawful, at least in theory, the question is supposed to stop there, you're supposed to be free to go. That's how it is supposed to. Number 6, is there any difference in how Fourth Amendment rights should be exercised when dealing with ICE versus with local police? I think we've already talked about that in some detail. Generally, yes, there's a big difference. As I said before, ICE attendants are usually civil and designed to figure out, is this person lawfully or are they not? Police investigation are usually related to them investigating some type of underlying criminal activity. Number 7, is a warrant required for ICE arrest? It's a tricky one because they actually are not required to have a warrant to do immigration enforcement under certain circumstances. What are those circumstances? So this is pursuant to federal law. I'm not going to bore you guys with the numbers. I'm just going to let you know that basically the law allows for ICE officers to arrest any alien who his presence or view, who basically the officer observes unlawfully entering the United States or attempting to enter the United States, and the officer has reason to believe the alien so arrested unlawfully is inside the United States and likely to escape before they can go and get a warrant. So that's just a long-winded way of saying, if they see felonious criminal activity happening right in front of them and they don't think they have time to get a warrant, they can make an ICE arrest just based on those circumstances without a warrant. Number 9, is there a benefit to calling police to respond to unlawful ICE activity, including unlawful arrests? Frankly, no. Whether ICE activity is unlawful is really a question of law for courts to decide. If you believe a person was arrested unlawfully by ICE, I would highly encourage you to contact an attorney who challenge lawfulness in court. Local police don't usually have the authority to always stop federal immigration enforcement, or sometimes there's a split version between that. So I wouldn't advise for a private citizen trying to stop it on their own by calling police. Number 10, what rights does a person have to resist unlawful arrest? This is a tricky one also. I'm gonna lead by saying don't get yourself hurt. And that's the reason for that is because in Maryland, under Maryland law, there is a right to lawfully resist what you believe is an illegal arrest. The trouble with that is, again, whether an arrest is illegal or not is always up for court to determine. And if you resist arrest, one, you can get hurt, and two, you could end up being wrong later if the court determines that the arrest was lawful. So, in an abundance of caution, I would advise just playing it safe, complying with an arrest, and then hiring attorneys to challenge it in court later for your own safety and, of course, for protection. Number 11, if you were taken by ICE, what are your rights once in custody, including contact with the outside world? Can you make calls? Can you take a shower? Can you get clean bedding? All those things. So I'll start by saying again, the U.S. Constitution remains in effect even while you are in custody, and even if you are a non-citizen. They are also protected by the United States Constitution, as we talked about before. Non-citizens have rights under the Fifth Amendment Due Process Clause, under the Eighth Amendment, principles against cruel and unusual punishment, and of course the 14th Amendment, which applies the federal Constitution analogously in states. Once in custody, so those are the rights that you have. I'm going to talk a little bit briefly also about what is called the ICE performance-based national detention standards. So these are basically the policies and standards in place for ICE detention facilities. They're not binding laws, so there's not actually rights attached to them, but they are policies that could be used as evidence if you do decide to challenge, if you do decide later on that your rights were violated when challenging court. Those standards, those things can be used as evidence. Oh, in addition to that, in addition to the standards, those standards govern that you can get a free phone call. You can have visitors. You get to call your attorney. You do have a right to take a shower and to eat food. And I think I should point out that the reason why I think this question is important is because there's literally litigation pending in our federal court in Maryland district right now, where people are challenging these very things happening, where people are denied the right to get food, get meals, take a shower. And if you really want to check it out later, the name of that case is Dean versus Baker, pending right here in Maryland Federal District Court. I'm going to take a look at that later. So between your substantive constitutional rights and the national standards, the ICE detention facilities have in place, those are all things you have access to. If a family member is taken by ICE, who should you contact? The family member should immediately contact the attorney. The attorney can help assist with ensuring the family member's rights are protected, and also, of course, while in custody, they will probably have likely easier access to that person. How can you ensure that you are able to keep track of a family member in custody? You can use the online detainee locator system to find that person. There's a link. Happy to share that link later. It's easier to make it accessible to people who are attending. But you can also just simply Google online detainee locator system, or ICE detainee locator system. Sure, whatever search term you put in, it'll be pretty simple to find. Number 14, what civil remedies are available for abuses by police and ICE? Are they different for police versus ICE? Civil remedies are generally always available for things like false imprisonment, false arrest, or related to the excessive use of force during encounters. They're always generally available against ICE and against local police. The difference would be, I guess, whatever laws you would assert to challenge that particular unlawful activity or arrest. Usually under ICE, it's going to be, of course, federal law because it's a federal entity. And usually police officers, local police officers, are going to be under whatever local and state laws provide you those remedies. Number 15, who are the state and local agencies responsible for policing, monitoring, and regulating ICE activity? ICE is governed by federal authority. Sometimes local and state governments will enter into what's called a 287G agreement. And those are basically agreements where local governments are allowed to assist with limited immigration enforcement. However, ICE delegates that authority to the local government. So ICE always remains in control, and essentially they only report to higher ranking federal officials when they're doing immigration enforcement. They just sometimes collaborate essentially with local and state law enforcement. What is the 100-mile zone, and to what extent can Border Patrol conduct warrantless stops within that zone? So there's a term called reasonable distance, which is defined under the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986. Long way of saying that is defined as being within 100 miles of any U.S. border. So that's where that term 100-mile zone comes from. It's just basically a definition of what defines the 100-mile radius. And so within that 100-mile radius, ICE officers and the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, basically Border Patrol, they can conduct any enforcement activities in the jurisdiction within that 100-mile radius while doing so. However, it still, again, does not permit warrantless searches of automobiles. The Fourth Amendment still protects against warrantless searches, even when ICE and Border Patrol officers attempt to mask it as an administrative inspection, or they're trying to mask it as their sort of routine immigration enforcement, which some forces just called roving patrols. Again, these still have to be supported by reasonable suspicion. 17. Do you see any opportunities for changes to the law that could have substantive impact? For example, we talked about 287 agreement, 287G agreements just a few moments ago. Some examples of that are banning those and basically allowing or having states not enter into those agreements, or even banning masks for certain law enforcement officers. Personally, I would say yes. I do support those types of policy that some changes to the law. I think some local governments should support perhaps banning and refusing to enter agreements with ICE to protect those who are vulnerable. And I also support the mask bans as well, so that way people can actually at least see the face of someone who could potentially taking away their rights, violating their rights, and unlawfully detaining them. This is the first one I added, and I guess maybe it's because I grew up like old school music. I believe that law enforcement should also be required to wear their traditional uniforms, emblem, their official badge. I think there's been a trend to like wearing a lot of tactical gear, which I think sometimes scares people, but it's very casual. I like the old school button, the emblem, badge, so that way you can know that you're not counting. It's always reference to things going on. The last, and I think the most important question for us to all walk away is there anything hopeful? Is there anything that makes you hopeful about the current climate, considering all of things we just discussed? For me, yes. If you ever get a chance and you are a nerd like me and want to read part of the Supreme Court decision, what makes me hopeful is reading the dissent in that particular opinion, authored by Justice Sotomayor. Because it discusses the reality of what's actually happening on the ground. If you read Justice Kavanaugh's decision, or his concurrence rather, it gives the idea that these encounters always happen in this ideal manner. Officers going up to people, asking basic questions, and things always ending out right. And it's not what's going on. It's certainly not what's happening in Operation Large out in LA. So the dissent reminds me that there are still other legal questions out there. One, are mindful. They acknowledge that there are practical favors happening right in front of us. And two, they understand the importance of protecting constitutional rights for everyone, regardless of what your religious status might be. So I think as long as there are people who are that honest, that courageous to recognize that, I have hope that we still can develop solutions around it. In a perfect world, ICE encounters would be a simple matter of question, like Justice Kavanaugh suggested, but in the current climate, they just simply are not. And I think we can only solve issues like that together. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you. I'm mindful I forgot to actually click on all these slides.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna give us, let's say, yeah, okay. We have some time for questions, yes. I'm gonna limit us to 15 minutes because they will kick us out if we go past 8 PM and we do have a couple of other speakers, but, if you have a question and you, speak Spanish, feel free to either unmute yourself or type it into the chat. We have an interpreter here. That being said, if you have a question in the room, please raise your hand. If you have a question on Zoom, feel free to either type it in or use the raise hand function. Yes.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Maybelline, and can you remind me your name?
My name is Andrew, and this is Paris.
Fair.
Mr. Andrew, you spoke about warrants. I want to know what the warrants say. Like, what's the title, and what else should we look for besides our name and address?
Well, the scope of the warrant can be as broad or as narrow as the drafter who puts it together. It should say warrant on the top of it. It should have your name and your address. Now, every time somebody petitions for a warrant, they can say, we're going to be looking for all evidence of criminal activity. All right, well, what is that, right? So I would look at the scope of the warrant, where they're to look or where they're not to look. Now, in practical sense, officers will draft warrants broadly to allow them to go from, wherever, not wherever they want to go, but to give them the broadest scope of their authority while in your hands. So when it's a long answer of saying, look at the entire document. They will ask you to sign it, or they should. Read it and observe what's going on in your own house, because this is your house, whether you're a renter or an owner. You need a warrant to come into that space. And warrants are frequently botched, meaning wrong names, wrong addresses, and things like that. And if that's the case, it's an invalid warrant.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have a question about documentation. I've heard a lot of people have been taken in and then released, and whatever they've had with them, they don't always get back. Sometimes it's jewelry, but it's also sometimes people have carried their passports with them. They've still been taken in, they've been released, and now they don't have their passports. Would you recommend people bringing copies of documentations or originals?
Oh, absolutely. Definitely take copies. And look, if somebody's taking your property when you've been taken into custody, whether it's by ICE or any other type of law enforcement individual, look, that's your property. You have a right to it back unless there's something of that property that is evidence of some crime. So in the event that you walk out of wherever you've been held and you have less than what you had when you walked in, you need to contact an attorney and have that individual try to collect your belongings, because they're yours. And having copies is always a good idea.
I know you have questions, but I've heard that in the CFR there is a regulation that federal agents are supposed to identify themselves. Obviously, we're not living in an ideal world, but is there a code where they have to, or is that just a rumor?
Law enforcement should always identify themselves. Now, as far as ICE, there's a lot of controversy about these masks and who are you? And to be quite honest with you, I don't know how they're getting away with that. They shouldn't be, because as the Paris said, something goes wrong, and how are you going to identify who assaulted or violated your rights? There should be names on individuals. You should be able to identify law enforcement that you're interacting with. Certainly, law enforcement needs to identify themselves as such, the police or ICE or Border Patrol. But for reasons that are associated with the change in the administration, the individuals now are able to hide behind a mask.
Okay. I have a question that did come in through Zoom. I'm going to. Okay. Could I ask the interpreter to read this and tell us what it says in English?
Yes. Good night. My name is Lady, and I want to know if there's contact for lawyers. I don't know how to say that word. If there's a contact.
Sure. So there's lots of resources for that. The Maryland State Bar Association is
Free lawyers, free legal services.
right. That's so.
Is there a
I
list?
was just translating the last word that he couldn't
Oh,
translate.
all right. I thought you were identifying an
No,
organization.
she asked about, she was
So it's
asking.
going to be called like free legal services. It is. Practical, but the one that I'm familiar with is the Maryland State Bar Association. Their website has a wonderful page for referrals by county that you can call, which several different telephone numbers that you can call and identify not only pro bono lawyers, but whatever lawyer you might be looking for if you're in need of a referral.
Maryland Volunteer
Volunteer
Legal
follow
Service.
up comment.
There was a follow up. What was that, Paris?
Maryland Volunteer Legal Service, sometimes referred to as MBLS, is another resource as well.
Maryland Voluntary Legal Service.
And she said that she has her court date on September 2026. So that's why she was asking.
Okay, have her call the Volunteer Legal Services or the Maryland State Bar Association as soon as possible to get her hearing moved.
Yes, sir. Could you please introduce yourself?
Sure thing, Ernest. My name is Mark Parker. I'm pastor of the community. I serve on the city council here. So the city of Baltimore, also in our budget, is putting money towards two particular services you can access through a hotline operated by CASA. One is access to free legal services through Avica and some other partners. The other is case management for families of people who are detained to help those families kind of navigate the non-legal process of taking care of their lives and children and other things like that, accessing other supports and services. So the number for that is 888-214-6016. 888-214-6016. There's essentially a 24 to 48 hour, mostly it's like leaving a message. There's a 24 to 48 hour response window kind of built into that for follow-up. And it is most helpful for a family member of the person detained to call. The system bogs down when a family member and a friend and their local pastor and their community association president all call about the same case, and it's harder for them to focus the resources and the response to because it's pretty overwhelming. So just want to make sure that phone number was out there.
We have a comment here I think you can see on the screen, and it is asking, what is the purpose of this meeting? Because we have rights, but they no longer seem to apply. I'm summarizing a little bit here. I'm just going to, I'll let others answer in a moment. But I'm just going to speak for myself here. I sympathize with this sentiment. I understand where you are coming from, and it is scary. I think that this meeting has two purposes. One is it is still useful to know what your rights are supposed to be, and by being aware of those, you can also give information to your attorney if something happens to you, and that still matters. Now, as far as how do we protect ourselves and our neighbors, I would say that part of that is coming together as a community and talking to each other and organizing. There are people in this room who are already taking action. I don't think it is realistic to promise that everything will be all right, or that all injustices will be set right. I don't agree. I don't believe that is the case, but everything we do still does matter. In authoritarian governments, what they want you to do is to believe that nothing we do will matter, and therefore we should just give up. And I don't think that is the case. But if anybody has any other responses to that question, I invite them to speak up now.
The authoritative administrations try to normalize this behavior. That people start to see it and they stop questioning it, and then it just becomes the status quo. And that's why knowing your rights and knowing what to point to something and say, no, that's wrong. That's not correct. These are what my rights are is the first step protecting ourselves, because that's the point of this talk.
I'm going to take two last comments. So, interpreter, I think you can see a message here. Could you please translate that for us?
Good night. I am Jenny, and I want to know if there's any lawyers of free service.
Yes.
So I just
we already
heard that question.
We already answered that. Okay. Then in that case, I will invite you to take a look at this other question from a person on Zoom asking about what Baltimore City Police is allowed to do to protect us, or what are they supposed to be doing. And they point out especially when an ICE agent could be someone in costume.
Sure. Paris and I were talking about this earlier today when we were preparing for today. Look, if an ICE agent is exceeding his or her authority and abusing an individual, generally, you can call the police on that individual, because the police would have a duty in that instance to stop whatever might be going wrong that is assaulting or hurting an individual. So your police are still here. So that is still a resource that you have.
Sorry, Mark, but we really do have to. Can you make it quick?
Sure, I'm just further answering the question with the actual BPD policy on it.
Sure.
So BPD policy is that no matter who calls, right, it might be ICE calling because they've encountered disruptive citizens and they are displeased and want BPD to deal with that. It could be citizens themselves calling out of concern for what they see transpiring and a lack of access. BPD is supposed to respond in any event. If they see people claiming to be officers, they are the first task is to request and receive identification of the law enforcement background of those folks and get whatever information there might be about the nature of the interaction. They're not supposed to assist in the immigration action. However, if citizens, if residents, of other people are engaged in some form of illegal conduct, say blocking the streets or things like that, which no matter what's happening, the BPD isn't supposed to decide why you may be doing it. They just care that you are doing it, and so does their responsibility to make sure that you are not doing it, and things like that. So that's the fine line that's being drawn. But you feel free to call. Recognize that BPD is in a difficult position as they respond to that, but please do call, and they will come and they will identify what's taking place, and they will, that may be the limit of what they're able to do, but at least they will do that.
Now, as I often say when I am running these meetings, we are on a time crunch because they close this place at 8 o'clock. So we do have to move it along. However, I know that our guests are going to be available after the meeting for those of you who are in the room, if you would like to speak to them or if you have any other questions. But I hope you will join me in thanking them for their time and giving us information. Our next guest is this gentleman over here, Sam Cogan, who is the sheriff of Baltimore. And Sheriff, I promised you 10 minutes, so floor is now yours.
Thanks. I'll use it wisely. So I guess I can. Do you want me to come up there, or what's best? I know I'm on camera right now, so should stay where I am.
I think they hear you.
Okay, great. Sam Cogan, I'm the sheriff of Baltimore, run the sheriff's office. I am your sheriff. I work directly for the people. And I'm going to stay on theme a little bit with what's being talked about. And I want to compare Baltimore with Philadelphia. So Philadelphia we look at there was just an article in the Philadelphia Inquirer that said the Philadelphia courthouses are hunting grounds for ICE, right? And I'm going to tell you that as long as I'm the sheriff, that's not going to happen in the Circuit Court of Baltimore City. I think the way that ICE is behaving, and I'm saying this as a law enforcement official, is sickening to me, right? And it's something that if any of my people engaged in that kind of behaviors that I'm seeing, where people are jumping out with masks and violating people's rights and terrorizing communities, that they would be fired immediately, and I would probably look at referring the case to the state attorney for criminal prosecution. So as the elected sheriff, again, I'm elected by you, right? And agents who come in from the federal government who are doing this kind of thing are eroding everything that we're trying to do, and that I'm trying to do to develop public trust with the community and to interact with the community in a positive way, and to enforce laws that are here to protect people and to guard against people being injured by other people. Now there are criminal gangs and violent offenders in every community, and I want to say that they're not, right? But there's lawful and constitutional and community acceptable ways of addressing that. And the way ICE is addressing mass deportation, which is really mass arrest, is not the way to be doing that. And so every community association meeting that I go to, I talk about this, right? And I think I'm obligated. This is the time I think that elected leaders have to speak up very loudly about what's going on and address it. I'm empowered to arrest people who interfere with the rights of litigants in the courthouse. And so what we've done is we set in a check-in procedure, and no one walks into the courthouse who's in law enforcement without checking in with me, right, at my front counter, and identifying why they're there, right, and what purpose they're there for. And if they have an administrative warrant, right, and not a judicial warrant, then it's a lot different, right? An administrative warrant is not something that I'm interested in as the sheriff of Baltimore City. Now, if there's a judicial warrant signed by a judge that someone's going to assign that they're going to search the courthouse in some kind of way and interrupt the court business, then that's something that I would have to deal with. But the administrative warrants I do not have to deal with, and we do not. And we're going to continue not to do that. And also, like Councilman Parker said, it's very important that we identify who individuals are if they're walking around with guns and masks and grabbing people, right? And so, again, that's why people know this as well. We also believe that we have a duty, and I believe that we have a duty to serve all people who live in the city, right? And we've been trying to do that through the events and festivals that we've been supporting, where people are going to, like the Lantern Parade and the different Latino festivals and whatnot, where people should feel safe and be able to come out in the city and live. I'm going to shift a little bit and I'll talk about National Guard. I'm also think it's abhorrent that we're under threat of the National Guard coming into the city. Again, that's the exact opposite of what we want. Like, what are they doing here? Why would they even come here? What's the purpose? It's $1 million a day is what the cost it is to keep them in DC. For $1 million, I can hire 10 deputies for a year. For a week of the National Guard, I could have 7 deputies. And if I had 7 deputies, I guarantee crime would be down even further, right? So it just doesn't make sense for so many reasons. And again, we're at this really terrible time where things are going on in DC, and we've thrown out some of the Constitution, and people are behaving in a way that I think that reasonable and moral people, find sickening, and I feel that as well. So I thank you guys for coming in and talking about this kind of stuff. I think everyone should be talking about it. I know people are taking, more serious actions and trying to warn people and do other things to try to protect people during this time period. And I have to make sure, as the elected law enforcement officer, we stay lawful, and I have to stay lawful, legal, and constitutional, because that's the oath that I've taken. But I sympathize with other individuals, but things like filming, things like making sure body cameras are on, making sure people are identified. Those are like common sense things that we should have. We shouldn't even have to have this discussion, but we are having this discussion, and these things are occurring. And it's, this is the time that we have to really look at, like, how do we make Baltimore different than other places? And what are people doing around the country to try to lawfully resist this kind of, unlawful, unconstitutional, undemocratic, un-American kind of behavior, right? And so, that's my, my thoughts on the issue, that I try to come and listen to people. I'm not, making sure that, within communities, people know how to reach out to me, especially in communities that are now rightfully very distrustful about law enforcement. I can talk all day long and sort of have to show by actions that we're trustworthy. And I think we're starting to show that a little bit, but there's only like so much that I can do. And so that's why it's good to see that there are other people and people are interested in this issue. And I think people are paying attention to this kind of stuff. I firmly believe that, without the public trust, we can't police, right? And we have to police to a community standard. And so like on that issue, I don't think there's really is any compromise on that kind of stuff. I'd be happy, like, if I'm done, like 5 more minutes or where. So I want to talk about the other stuff the sheriff's office is doing, because I think we're doing some good stuff. We just implemented a neighborhood services unit, which is works directly for the people again. And so like I'll just say like one of the and it just started in October. It's the General Assembly passed unanimously that the Sheriff's Office, Baltimore City, shall have a neighborhood services unit that shall, one, assist the liquor board in enforcing the alcohol beverage laws. So if you have a problem bar or establishment that's not up to compliance and not behaving like a good neighbor, I'd love to hear from you as the community association, and we can go out there, and unlike the liquor inspectors that are civilian, we have law enforcement authority, and we can address issues. We can also address issues like tobacco stores that are really selling cannabis to children, and also selling tobacco to children, which is also bad. We've been looking at that as well, and trying to address those issues. Package theft is a big issue. We were just here at Baltimore and East Avenue. We arrested 3 people tonight for stealing our package that had a GPS in it. And the goal for that, why are you doing that? People want to know. All 3 of the individuals we arrested admitted to significant substance abuse issues, and they're going to be referred to the drug treatment court. And we feel like that's the right thing to do. So we're looking at like what are the root causes, but someone with a substance abuse issue that's so significant they have to steal, right, is harming the community and probably harming themselves, and we have to do something about that. And I think people want us to do something about it. And how do we do something about that constitutionally, and to the public standard? The person is arrested on the scene, identified, issue a citation, they go to the citation docket where they're offered community service and drug treatment, the first offense. And I think that it's a very reasonable response, and sort of a public health kind of approach to those kind of things. So we're able to do things like that as well. I really do want to hear from the community association if you have an issue that the sheriff's office can help you address. We have a tow truck that we bought, a flatbed tow truck, because we know abandoned vehicles are a huge issue for a lot of community associations. And so we can come out and we can tow cars from you. We can do traffic enforcement. There's a specific area that requires, you want people to slow down, or a school zone or something like that. We can come out for 2 or 3 days and address those issues through our neighborhood service issue. We also deal with interpersonal violence. So if you know somebody who is in a violent relationship, whether that's a dating relationship or child in common or marriage relationship, or it's just a neighbor thing, we serve all the peace and protective orders in the city. And so a lot of people who are not willing to get their intimate partner arrested but need to leave that violent relationship use the civil process, which is the peace orders, where the sheriff can go, a protective order, the sheriff can go out and serve the protective order, which is like a restraining order. We can take firearms from people. We can put them out of the house temporarily, and then people can leave those violent relationships. So that's something that we do at the sheriff's office as well. And then finally, we serve warrants on people who have violated their probation and are, while they're on probation, usually have committed another crime, or haven't reported absconded ever. And so that's one of the main functions that we do. So we put out a list of the people who are wanted on serious, there usually are violent offenses, almost always are violent offenses. And then again, while they're on probation for the violent offense, commit another violent offense or fail to report. And so we have a very active fugitive group that goes out and does things with that. So that's the sheriff's office in a nutshell. Again, I work directly for you. I'm your sheriff. And so we really love it when you bring up an issue and talk to your community association president, and they know how to get contact with us. Shannon Conway is here with you today and Major Homa. Shannon can take any information or questions you have at the end, and we can get in touch with you directly, and I can answer any questions.
Well. Okay, I'm going to allow one question. Then, if you have any other questions, I'm sure the sheriff and the people from his office will be happy to speak to you. But I saw a hand go up over here.
Oh, it can totally go to someone who's actually in the association.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Sheriff.
Thank you for having me.
And so we have one more presentation. Hannah, please come on up. So let me make sure I can this way. Share this one. Yeah. This one. Okay.
Good evening. My name is Hannah Zaro, and this is my colleague Tanisha Douglas. And we're both here representing the Baltimore Children and Youth Fund. And we just wanted to share some information with you all about our next grant cycle that's coming up. So just some information about BCYF is we were created in 2018 when 80% of Baltimore voted to invest in our city's young people. And we're funded by 3 cents of every 100 property tax dollars. And BCYF uses 80% of the money it receives for direct grant making and professional development to support primarily Black and Brown led grassroots youth programs in Baltimore City. So our current offerings that we have and what we want to share with you is, sorry about that, the Grassroots Fund and the Community Accountable Fund applications open on January 8th and close February 13th. So we want to share this information if you or an organization that you know serve young children or youth in Baltimore City. This could be a really great opportunity for you to apply or let folks that you know, organizations that you know, let them know to apply for one of these opportunities. So the first fund that I mentioned is that Grassroots Fund. This is a 5-year award of $50,000 per year. So that's a total of $250,000 over a 5-year period. And this is for smaller emerging organizations that are doing really powerful work with Baltimore's youth. Some of the eligibility criteria is a little hidden. Let me see if I can do this.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So the eligibility criteria for the Grassroots Fund is you must be Baltimore City based, serving youth, and for our purposes, we consider that to be 24 and under. You must be a nonprofit, so 501c3, or have a fiscal sponsor, and then an organization budget of $350,000 or less for the Grassroots Fund. You must have been in existence for at least a year, with a year of experience running youth programs, and then 51% or more of your employees must be Baltimore City residents. Our second fund that we have is called the Community Accountable Fund, and this is a 3-year award of $75,000 per year, so that's $225,000 over a total of 3 years. And this is for organizations that are a little bit more established, have a little bit of a larger budget, but still community-based and youth-focused. The eligibility criteria is all the same for the Community Accountable Fund. The only difference is it's for organizations with budgets of $350,000 to $500,000. There we go. And we do know that applying for funding can be overwhelming, especially when we are primarily targeting grassroots organizations. A lot of the organizations that we currently fund had never received grant funds before applying to our organization and then receiving funds. So to address a lot of the common barriers that organizations may face, that smaller organizations may face, we offer some completely free application support. This support started on November 20th, so it's ongoing and it continues until the application closes. And it ranges from webinars, so we offer a series of webinars on different topics, diving into the questions on the application, providing a lot of tailored support to help folks navigate the application. We provide one-on-one sessions, so we have a team of consultants that are pretty available to meet with applicants based on their schedules and provide support either synchronously or they even allow applicants to send their application via email and really working with them to get their application to a place where they feel really proud of what they're sharing with us. And then we also have launch pads, and these are kind of our office hours, computer lab sessions for a full block of the day on Saturdays where folks can come in, meet with our consultant team, network with other folks that are applying, and just again build up their confidence to get their application submitted. If you are interested in participating in some of our pre-application technical assistance, the QR code here links to our website, and we'll also send out some resources at another time. And then connected to our application process is our community grant review. Unfortunately, the application for this closed today, but we run a really cool process in how we select our portfolio grantees, and that we working at BCYF are not who decide who receives the funds. The community members, people in Baltimore City, youth, adults are who select our grantees. So if you are at least 16 years of age, reside in Baltimore, have experience designing or operating these programs, are familiar with this ecosystem, and then for this cycle, have access to a laptop during the review period, you can apply, and community grant reviewers work for a series of 5 weeks, reviewing the applications, coming together to discuss what are the needs in the community, what kinds of organizations do we need to fund, what kinds of programs do we see are lacking, and community members are put together our slate and who we ultimately fund. So again, the application for this is closed for this cycle, but something to keep in mind for next year. If you want to sign up for BCYF newsletters, you can keep an eye out for future CGR calls for applicants. I'll turn it over to Tanisha.
Oh, hello guys, I'm Tanisha Douglas. I am a program officer here at BCYF, and I get the distinct pleasure of working with our team on the Youth Master Plan, which is a really exciting initiative that we are launching to shift the power to young people and grassroots leaders, aligning citywide resources around identified priorities and building accountability into city systems. So what that means is we want to lift up youth voice by giving them more space and training of our folks to build a roadmap that will empower our youth in Baltimore. The plan embodies BCYF's values of equity, abundance, and intergenerational leadership, creating a city where young people shape the future, and then we as adults get to champion the vision. So really exciting initiative. I would not be like my friend here and remember to advance my slides. Sorry. All right. So if you guys want to join the movement, you have the opportunity to scan. We have some QR codes here. So our first is for our individuals, and that's the Master Plan Squad. And that's for young people or individuals who are ready to stand with Baltimore's youth. So you can scan this code. It will take you to a drop-down list. It will take you to a drop-down list where you can select how you participate. And if you are a business or an organization or institution that's committing your resources or any of your networks to our young people, please feel free to join our Connector Club to support this initiative. So together we are Baltimore Master Plan Network, building a just, abundant, and creative future for our city's young people. So do feel free to scan this code and come join us while we build a new chapter in Baltimore's history. Thanks, guys.
So just a summary to remind you all, our funding cycle opens that January 8th, closes February 13th. Completely free application support for anyone that is interested in applying. So spread the word, encourage folks to apply, or if you have an organization, apply. Yeah. That's it. If you have any questions, you can email info@bcyfund.org.
Okay. Thank you very much. Very efficient. I love it. So, okay. So, before we wrap up, I would like to talk to you all a little bit about the future of the neighborhood and the neighborhood association. So before I do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of history. I first showed up to a community association meeting in 2017. Soon after I bought my first house. And back in those days, PPNA was a very active organization, but in money terms, much smaller. In a given year, they might give out, a few $100s in order to give school supplies to children, or to fund, a food event or something like that. These are all very worthy causes. But since then, we have grown immensely. Last year, we applied for and received about $80,000 of various grants and funding. This year, I actually haven't done the full accounting, but I think we have received and spent about $250,000 of funding for everything from the mural out on Lakewood to traffic calming that you see in various intersections, to security cameras, to string lighting that you see on many blocks. All of which is to say that in order to manage this amount of money, we have to be much more professional about the way we operate. And the board has been discussing this, and so we have made a few changes. Many of them are sort of behind the scenes technical things that I can tell you about if you really want to get bored. But what you should know is that there are, well, I'm going to tell you about two major changes. One is that from here on out, elected terms will last for 2 years. We do this because we feel that for the projects that we are taking on in the future, it takes much longer to see them through to the end. And the cadence we were on, where we would elect a board, and then the next year we would have a new board, and the next year we would have a new board, was causing disruptions. So the next elections in February, which I hope you will all participate in, please be aware that you are electing us to 2-year terms. Secondly, we felt that it would not be appropriate for a total newcomer to become the president. It's just, you need to have some experience working within the organization or a similar organizations. We are now creating a requirement that the president must be somebody that served at least a year on PPNA's board or in another neighborhood association. With that all being said, it has been my privilege to serve as your president for the past 4 years, but this will be my last year. Yes, that means that you can take a look at the current board, and that may give you an idea about potential candidates for the next president, but I'm not going to steal their thunder. I will still actually be involved. I guess I might as well tell you I intend to run for treasurer instead. But there are still positions that are available to you. Like I said, the president must be somebody who has served before in some capacity, but the other board members do not have to be. And as I said, we are doing big things at PPNA. It's a wonderful time to get involved. We're just doing big things, and we keep going from strength to strength. Our elections are in February, but now is the time for you to reach out to us if you are interested. I am happy to speak to you about any of these positions, and if you would like to do something that is not on the board, let me know, because we also have committees where you can also give a little bit of your time. Or maybe if you don't want to do that, maybe you would just like to throw a party, and we would be happy to give you some money to do that too. So, with that all being said, I am very mindful of the time, but I want to thank all of our guests for coming here and spending a little time with us to give us some information. We do have to get out of here in about 10 minutes. So I am going to call an end to this meeting. We can mingle about it and speak for a little bit, but after a while, they are going to, giving us the signal to wrap up. I forgot what else I was going to say, but thank you very much all for coming, and I call it into the meeting.
One more thing, everybody can give a big round of applause to Daniel, our interpreter.